The reverse current. In the waning days of autumn, the small town of Willow Creek, nestled along the murky banks of the Mississippi River in rural Louisiana, was shrouded in a dense fog that blurred the line between the living world and the beyond. The air was bitterly cold, carrying the damp chill of the river's breath, mingled with the earthy scent of decaying leaves, stagnant water, and the faint underlying rot that seemed to seep from the depths. The Mississippi here was infamous for its eerie undercurrents, with treacherous bends where boats could capsize in an instant, swallowing souls into its unforgiving embrace. The townsfolk eked out a living as fishermen and boatmen, their lives inextricably intertwined with the river's capricious whims, but they never dismissed the old Creole tales passed down through generations. Beneath the surface lurked the reverse current, an unnatural flow that defied physics, where the spirits of the drowned congregated, waiting patiently to drag the unwary down to join them in eternal limbo. Elias Hawthorne, a sturdy 27-year-old fisherman, was one of the town's most skeptical residents. Tall and broad-shouldered, his body honed by years of battling the river's relentless pull, Elias possessed a stubborn streak that dismissed superstitions as relics of ignorant times. Orphaned young when his parents' boat overturned in a sudden squall, an accident the elders attributed to river lower or vengeful spirits, he had built his life on practicality and denial. The river's just water dangerous, sure, but no ghosts haunting it. He de-scoffed when the old-timers spun yarns about spectral figures rising from the mist or whispers carried on the wind. He lived alone in a weathered wooden cabin by the water's edge, its creaking porch overlooking the dock, his only softness reserved for his girlfriend, Clara Beaumont, a gentle 22-year-old with flowing auburn hair that caught the faint sunlight and eyes that held a perpetual shadow of unease, as if she could sense the unseen forces lurking just beyond sight. Clara, raised on a blend of Creole folklore, Catholic saints, and whispers of voodoo from her grandmother, believed deeply in the unseen world. She often lit candles for the ancestors in their small shared altar, murmuring prayers in French patois, and shared her vivid dreams with Elias. Dreams that felt like warnings from the other side. Filled with omens and shadowy figures, they had met 2 years prior on the riverbank during a town festival, where Clara nearly slipped into the water while dancing to Zydeco music. Elias had caught her arm just in time, pulling her back with a grin that masked his own lingering fears of the river. From that moment, their bond grew, a quiet love amid the town's isolation. "You're my anchor in this crazy world," Clara would say, nestling against him by the fire. But Elias, with his unyielding rationality, often brushed off her concerns about the supernatural. "Darling, life's tough enough without inventing ghosts to scare ourselves." That fateful morning, the fog was so thick it swallowed the horizon, forcing Elias to rely on his lantern's dim glow to navigate the slippery path to the dock. The river lapped softly against the wooden pilings, accompanied by the faint melancholy chime of wind bells hanging from the eaves of the old Creole cottages lining the shore, a tradition meant to ward off evil spirits. Though Elias saw them as mere decorations, he shoved off in his flatboat, the oars cutting through the inky waters with practiced ease, casting nets into the depths. The current felt sluggish today, almost defiant, as if something heavy and resistant lurked below, pulling against the natural flow in subtle defiance, as his boat rounded the third bend known locally as Devil's Elbow for the dozens of lives it had claimed over the decades. With its hidden eddies and submerged snags, his net snagged something immense, heavier than any catch he'd ever hauled, thinking it a bounty of catfish, or perhaps a sunken log, dislodged by recent rains. Elias hauled it up with straining muscles, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. What emerged from the depths chilled him to the core. An antique coffin, its wooden surface mottled with river slime, a jeweled varnish cracked and peeling, bobbing ominously on the surface like a harbinger from the grave, crafted from dark cypress wood, etched with faded carvings of crosses and Vave's voodoo symbols. It was empty, no body inside, but the sight of it sent an involuntary shiver through him, a primal unease he couldn't shake. Elias muttered a curse under his breath, assuming some upstream flood had dislodged it from one of the forgotten bayou graveyards that dotted the delta. Though he prided himself on logic, a flicker of doubt crept in as he towed it back to shore, the river seeming to whisper protests with every stroke of the oar. By the time he docked, word had spread like wildfire through Willow Creek, the town's grapevine buzzing with alarm. Townsfolk gathered at the water's edge, murmuring in hushed tones laced with fear. "A coffin adrift on the Mississippi, that's a bad omen. Share, mark my words," grumbled old Mr. Thibodeau, a grizzled veteran of the bayous with a pipe perpetually clenched in his teeth, his eyes shadowed by memories of past tragedies. Others crossed themselves, whispering prayers to Our Lady of Prompt Succor. They summoned Mama Laveau, the 65-year-old town herbalist and voodoo priestess, revered and feared in equal measure for her knowledge of the old ways. She lived in a secluded shack near the crumbling chapel, surrounded by jars of roots, bones, and potions. Her rituals, a syncretic blend of Catholic prayers, African traditions, and Louisiana hoodoo. Mama Laveau was wiry and sharp-eyed, her face etched with lines like ancient runes carved by time and sorrow, always seeming to converse with shadows that only she could see. Dressed in a flowing shawl adorned with beads and charms, she approached with a measured gait, her presence commanding silence. Elias pried open the coffin lid before the assembled crowd, the wood groaning in protest under the foggy morning light. Inside lay nothing but a reversed talisman, a faded cloth amulet stitched with cryptic symbols in red thread, affixed upside down to the bottom, its orientation twisting what should have been a protective charm into something malevolent. Mama Laveau gasped, her gnarled hands trembling as she traced the symbols. This charm was meant to bind the soul, keep it from wandering, but turned round like this. It don't trap the spirit, it unleashes the grudge, lets the malice spill out into the world. Beside it was a yellowed letter of absolution, scrawled in faded ink that Mama swore was blood, its parchment half erased by water damage, as if the river itself had tried to swallow the words. Only fragments were legible. Spirit of a woman wronged, buried improperly in haste, soul imprisoned for decades. Seek right to release the torment, find a substitute to break the chain of suffering. The rest blurred into indecipherable smears, like secrets too dark to reveal. The crowd erupted in whispers. Local legends resurfaced, tales of drifting coffins carrying curses from the antebellum era, when slaves and outcasts were buried without proper rites. Whoever touches such a vessel becomes chosen as a replacement soul. Drowned spirits, interred without the correct rituals, especially those with reversed charms that corrupted binding spells into curses, would seek the living to swap places, pulling them into the reverse current for eternal torment while they ascended or reincarnated. Mr. Thibodeau recounted a story from his youth. 40 years back, a similar coffin washed up in the next parish. 3 folks drowned soon after, their bodies marked with bruises like ghostly fingers. The spirit was a young woman, accused of witchcraft, thrown in by her lover. Now, she's come here, seeking vengeance. Elias brushed it off with a forced laugh, shoving the coffin into the chapel's storage shed. Superstitious nonsense, all of it. I'll burn it tomorrow and be done. But Clara clutched his arm tightly, her voice quivering with genuine dread. Elias, I feel it in my bones. Something's wrong. We should do a ritual, light the candles, call on the Loa for protection. Please, don't dismiss this. That night, Willow Creek descended into an oppressive darkness, the fog thickening like a shroud that muffled all sound except the river's insidious murmur. Elias tossed in his narrow bed, the wind howling through cracks in the cabin walls, carrying the chill deep into his core. Half asleep, he heard it, a woman's wail echoing from the riverbank, raw and despairing, filled with an anguish that pierced the soul, mingling with the water's rhythmic slap and the wind bell's eerie, discordant toll. He bolted upright, heart pounding like a drum in a voodoo ceremony. The cry lingered, rising and falling like a lament for the lost, fading only as the first hints of dawn crept through the fog. He dismissed it as the wind playing tricks or perhaps a distant barge horn, but unease gnawed at him. The next morning, the river was littered with dead fish, thousands floating belly up, their eyes milky voids staring blankly at the sky, as if their life essence had been siphoned away in the night. The stench of rot hung heavy in the air, drawing swarms of flies that buzzed like omens. Panic gripped the town like a fever. Mama Laveau gathered the folks at the chapel, burning sage and chanting prayers in a mix of Latin and Yoruba. The spirits awake now, stare in the waters, touch that coffin, and you're marked for the reverse current. Elias remained defiant, heading out to fish as usual, but Clara began sensing anomalies that chilled her. She confided in him over supper, her hands trembling. I dreamed of her, a woman in white, sitting in the coffin, calling my name. Her face was pale as death, eyes hollow and weeping, hair dripping with river water. She told me her story. Names drowned 40 years ago by a jealous lover who accused her of hexing him with voodoo. But she was innocent, just a healer like Mama. Buried hastily in a hurricane, the charm reversed by mistake, trapping her soul in agony. Her grudge festering like swamp rot. Now she seeks escape through a living vessel, a substitute to take her place. Elias pulled her close, his voice steady but strained. It's just a dream, Clara. Your mind's playing tricks from all this talk. We'll get through it. Yet Elias too started having the same nightmare, night after night, each more vivid and terrifying than the last. In the dreams, Evangeline stared at him with eyes like bottomless pits, her voice a gurgling whisper. "Elias Hawthorne, you retrieved me from the depths. Now you must substitute for me. My grudge will pull you into the reverse current, soul for soul." He awoke, drenched in sweat, gasping for air, and once he swore he heard the wail right outside his window, accompanied by the drip-drip of water on the floorboards. Venturing out with a lantern, the fog enveloped him, and he glimpsed a pale silhouette vanishing into the mist, leaving behind a puddle of brackish water that smelled of decay. The horrors escalated relentlessly. The fog never lifted, blanketing Willow Creek in perpetual twilight, turning day into a dim, oppressive haze. Nocturnal cries grew louder, now accompanied by names whispered on the wind, first Mr. Thibodeau's, then others in the town. The old man vanished one stormy night. His boat washed ashore the next day, empty save for blood smears that formed cryptic waves on the hull. His body turned up downstream days later, bloated and bruised, fingers clenched as if clawing at invisible assailants, his face frozen in a scream. Townsfolk began dreaming en masse. Evangeline in white, her skin crawling with riverworms and algae, summoning them by name with a voice that echoed like drowning gasps. Elias tried to stay grounded, but hallucinations plagued him during his solitary fishing trips. Out on the river, he'd glimpse a pale face beneath the waves, eyes locking onto his, hands reaching up with skeletal fingers. At home, the air turned foul with the smell of decay. Once, he awoke to find Clara standing by the window, eyes glazed over, murmuring in a voice not her own, deep and watery, "I need a substitute. You're the one who freed me." Clara, growing paler by the day, confided more. "She speaks to me now, even awake. Evangeline says her lover bound her with ropes, tossed her in during the storm, her screams lost in the thunder. The burial was rushed. Kin too scared of her witchery to do it right. The reversed talisman didn't bind, it cursed her to wander, seeking release." Elias snapped, "Enough. We're seeing Mama tomorrow. This has to stop." Mama Laveau, delving deeper into the letter during preparations for a grand rite, uncovered more horrors. "This blood's hers, drawn from the fatal wounds as she gasped her last. The blurred part, a curse etched in agony. He who retrieves me must endure my fate, soul for soul in the reverse current, my torment becoming theirs." She brewed potions and drew protective circles, but warned, "The grudge is strong. Only a full rite might appease her." The climax unfolded at the chapel rite, under a blood moon that pierced the fog like a malevolent eye. The entire town gathered, torches flickering against the mist, drums throbbing like frantic heartbeats. Mama Laveau, adorned in ritual beads and feathers, led the ceremony with incantations and offerings. Rum poured for the lower, candles for the saints. The coffin sat at the center, the letter unfurled on an altar of bones and herbs. As she recited the absolution, invoking Baron Samedi and Urs, the obscured words bled fresh crimson onto the parchment, glowing unnaturally. Mama's voice faltered. "The chosen, named in blood aforetime, Elias Hawthorne." Elias leaped up, terror etching his features, his voice a hoarse cry. "Impossible. How could it know my name?" The crowd recoiled in horror, crossing themselves. The letter ignited spontaneously, flames licking the air with acrid smoke. Wails thundered from the river, shaking the chapel walls. Candles extinguished in a gust of icy wind, shadows dancing like grasping claws. Elias fled into the night, the fog closing in like a living entity. He felt an icy grip on his ankle, the river surging unnaturally toward him. Evangeline's form rose from the waters, translucent horror, flesh sloughing off in ribbons, bones gleaming wetly under decayed skin, eyes sockets of endless void, arms extended with rotting fingers. "You awakened me. Now join the depths as my substitute." His boat overturned with a violent lurch. Water engulfed him, cold and relentless, pulling him into the reverse current, where time warped into an eternal loop of drowning lungs burning. Visions of Evangeline's death flashing before him, souls of the drowned pressing close with accusatory stares. Clara's screams echoed from the shore as he vanished beneath the surface. Don brought his empty boat ashore, blood etching his name in Vavis. Elias Hawthorne. His body was never found, but the town knew his soul had been claimed, substituted for Evangeline's freedom. Clara, shattered and hollow-eyed, wandered the banks for days, whispering, "She's free now," but she returned for more if another disturbs her rest. The grudge lingers. She too disappeared one foggy night, her boat drifting with similar bloody marks. Willow Creek withered into a ghost town. Folks fled, leaving behind crumbling homes and a chapel haunted by eternal fog. Travelers still report cries from the river, coffins drifting anew, and dreams of the woman in white, eternally seeking substitutes in the Mississippi's merciless reverse embrace, where the boundary between life and death dissolves into endless terror.